Imagine a freezing morning in the year 793. Out of a thick, gray fog, a few wooden boats with carved dragon heads silently glide toward the peaceful shores of Lindisfarne, England. The men who step off those ships don't just want trade, they want blood, gold, and land. In a matter of hours, these few Nordic raiders didn't just terrorize a monastery, they completely shattered the old world order forever. To the medieval mind, this wasn't just a sudden pirate raid. This was the opening salvo of a global cataclysm, a 300-year explosion of expansion that would redraw the maps of 3 continents. For 3 centuries, these Scandinavian seafaring warriors threw themselves into a whirlwind of terrifying coastal raids, brilliant naval engineering, and epic continental conquests. We call this era the Viking Age. Today, we are breaking down this incredible, blood-soaked saga into a definitive 20-minute masterclass. Leave your modern assumptions at the door. Let's look at the map. 1. The Spark, a highway of water. To understand how a relatively small group of people from the harsh, rocky landscapes of Scandinavia managed to flip global history on its head, we have to look at the late 8th century. The world they entered was deeply divided, but to the Norsemen, it was completely vulnerable. In Western Europe, the ocean had long been viewed as a barrier, a protective moat that kept local kingdoms safe from the outside world. The Anglo-Saxons in England and the Franks, in what is now France, were too busy fighting their own local wars to worry about their coastlines. But the Norsemen saw the water differently. To them, the sea was not a wall, it was a highway. It all started with a revolution in technology, the longship. This wasn't just a bigger rowboat, it was a masterpiece of naval engineering. The longship featured a uniquely shallow draft, which meant it could float in water that was only a few feet deep. It was strong enough to cross the stormy, unpredictable North Atlantic Ocean, yet agile enough to sail right up a shallow river into the absolute heart of a continent. Imagine sitting in a quiet village miles inland, thinking you are perfectly safe from ocean pirates, only to look out your window and see a fleet of warships rowing up your local creek. It was the medieval equivalent of a stealth bomber. The raiders could appear out of nowhere, strike a wealthy, unprotected target like a monastery or a marketplace, load up their ships with treasure and captives, and vanish back into the mist before the local lord could even gather his knights. This speed and unpredictability paralyzed Europe with fear. But why did they leave home in the first place? For a long time, historians thought it was just because Scandinavia was overpopulated. Today, we know the story is a bit more complicated. Life in the north was tough. The soil was poor, the winters were brutal, and arable land was hard to come by. Furthermore, inheritance laws meant that if you were a younger son in a Norse family, you inherited basically nothing. Your only real options were to scrape by as a poor farmer or take a massive gamble, hop on a ship, and try to win wealth and fame with your own 2 hands. At the same time, the trade routes of Europe were shifting. Silver from the Islamic world was flowing into Scandinavia through Eastern trade networks, creating a new appetite for luxury and power among Norse chieftains. To stay on top, these chiefs needed a constant supply of silver and prestige to reward their followers. Raiding became the ultimate startup business of the 9th century. A few ambitious men would pool their resources, build a ship, and head out to make their fortunes. 2. The Great Heathen Army, the conquest of England. As the years progressed, the nature of Scandinavian maritime aggression underwent a fundamental shift. The Norsemen realized that Europe wasn't just full of gold stored in defenseless monasteries. It was paralyzed by institutional weakness. Western Europe was deeply fractured. The vast Carolingian Empire had split into warring factions, while Anglo-Saxon England was divided into 4 small competing kingdoms: East Anglia, Mercia, Northumbria, and Wessex. The raiders stopped just taking the silver and running away. They recognized a historic opportunity for conquest and settlement. In 865, the The conflict shifted from seasonal hit-and-run piracy to full-scale territorial colonization. Instead of small bands of a few dozen men dropping anchor for a quick strike, a massive, coordinated coalition of Scandinavian warriors landed on the coast of East Anglia. Contemporary Anglo-Saxon scribes in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle recorded this terrifying coalition as the Mysil-Here, or the Great Heathen Army. Led by the legendary sons of Ragnar Lodbrok, including the brilliant strategist Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan Ragnarsson, and Ubba, this army wasn't looking for quick plunder. They were looking for permanent real estate. They marched across the English countryside using brilliant mobile tactics. They frequently seized horses to outmaneuver their enemies and wintered in fortified camps, such as the major base discovered by archaeologists at Repton. One by one, the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms collapsed. Northumbria fell in 866 after the Norsemen captured York, renaming it Jorvik, and executed King Ella. East Anglia was crushed in 869, and its king, Edmund the Martyr, was ritually executed. Mercia was torn apart by 874, its ruler driven into exile and replaced with a puppet king. The Norsemen brought down ancient dynasties in a matter of years, utilizing the traditional, dense defensive infantry formation known as the Shield Wall to shatter Anglo-Saxon resistance. By 878, only one Anglo-Saxon kingdom remained standing, Wessex, ruled by a young, desperate monarch named Alfred the Great. Following a surprise winter attack on his royal court at Chippenham, Alfred was forced into hiding in the Somerset marshes at Athelney, waging a desperate campaign of guerrilla warfare. Rallying his remaining forces, Alfred emerged to win a decisive victory over the Norse leader Guthrum at the Battle of Edington. Alfred managed to hold the line by implementing a revolutionary military system. He built a vast network of fortified communal towns called burhs, which is actually where the modern English suffix "berry" comes from, and established a standing navy to intercept raiders at sea. Eventually, realizing he could not drive the Norsemen out of the island completely, Alfred negotiated the Treaty of Alfred and Guthrum. This historic agreement drew a geopolitical line right down the middle of England. The land to the north and east became the Danelaw, a vast, semi-independent territory ruled by Norse customary law and settled by waves of Scandinavian farmers. This permanent geopolitical divide reshaped English legal structures, dialects, and genetics, ensuring a distinct Anglo-Norse cultural synthesis that persisted for generations. 3. The birth of Normandy. Meanwhile, across the English Channel, another devastating wave of raiders was making life a living nightmare for the Kingdom of the West Franks. Using the deep inlets of the continental coastline, they sailed right up the Seine River, easily bypassing primitive coastal defenses, and launched brutal assaults against the Frankish heartland. They besieged Paris multiple times, most famously during the massive siege of 885 to 886, where hundreds of longships choked the river. This constant devastation crippled Frankish commerce and illustrated that the fracturing Carolingian state lacked the military centralization required to defend its inland river systems. The Carolingian king, Charles the Simple, grew utterly tired of paying massive fortunes in protection money, a predatory tax known as Donegeld. He realized that paying the invaders to go away was a losing strategy that only ensured they would return the following year with more ships and higher demands. So, in the year 911, he decided to try a radically different, highly unconventional tactic. He approached a prominent, towering Norse chieftain named Rollo, who historians have hypothesized to be the historical figure Hrolfr the Ganger, and offered him a historic, geopolitical deal. Sealed by the historic Treaty of Saint-Clair-sur-Epte, the king declared, "I will grant you the land at the mouth of the Seine River. In exchange, you must convert to Christianity, swear fealty to me as my vassal, and promise to defend Paris from any other Vikings who try to sail up the river." Rollo took the deal reportedly refusing to kneel and kiss the king's foot himself, ordering one of his warriors to do it instead, who promptly lifted the king's foot so high, the monarch tumbled backward. Despite the rocky etiquette, the deal held. That newly established duchy became known as the Land of the Northmen, or Normandy. Within a few generations, Rollo's Scandinavian descendants completely adapted to their new home through a rapid process of cultural assimilation. They intermarried with the local Frankish population, forgot their native Old Norse tongue in favor of Old Norman French, and converted fully to Catholicism. This hybrid culture blended Scandinavian ambition with Frankish feudalism, establishing a highly centralized administration capable of unparalleled military projection. They transformed from sea pirates into some of the most sophisticated, ambitious, and fearsome feudal lords in Europe. They did not limit their ambitions to France. Norman adventurers traveled southward to carve out kingdoms in southern Italy and Sicily, fundamentally altering Mediterranean politics. One of Rollo's direct great-great-great-grandchildren, a man named William, Duke of Normandy, would utilize this elite Norman cavalry to cross the English Channel in 1066. By winning the Battle of Hastings, he would conquer Anglo-Saxon England, completely reshaping the English language, culture, and global political alignment forever. If you are enjoying this deep dive into how a few adventurous souls completely rewrote the map of the world, take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a historical masterclass. Now, I want to hear your thoughts down in the comments section below. If you had to choose, would you rather have been an Atlantic explorer sailing into the unknown with Leif Erikson, or a legendary elite mercenary serving in the Varangian Guard in Constantinople? Drop your answer and let me know why. 4. The Eastern Highway, the Rus and Miklagard. While one wave of Norsemen was pushing west into Britain and France, another group was looking east across the Baltic Sea. These Swedish raiders and traders, often called the Varangians or the Rus, likely derived from an Old Norse word for the men who row, took their longships down the massive river systems of Eastern Europe, chiefly the Dnieper and the Volga. This was a completely different kind of warfare and logistics. Instead of navigating open oceans, they masterfully traveled down winding, unpredictable rivers. When the waters grew too shallow, or they hit impassable rapids, they engaged in portage, physically dragging their heavy boats across miles of land using wooden rollers, carrying their heavy cargo on their backs until they reached navigable water again. Moving deeper and deeper into the vast interior of the continent, they established vital fortified trading posts and fortresses at strategic river junctions like Novgorod and Kiev. Over generations, these Norse traders and warriors intermarried with the local Slavic and Finno-Ugric populations. This cultural synthesis created a powerful, wealthy new political entity known as the Kievan Rus. According to the medieval historical text known as the Primary Chronicle, the local tribes actually invited the Norse prince Rurik to rule over them in 862 to bring order to their fractured lands, establishing the long-lasting Rurik dynasty. These eastern adventurers didn't stop at the rivers. They sailed all the way down to the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, opening up the vital trade route from the Varangians to the Greeks. This route brought them face to face with the richest, most sophisticated metropolis in the medieval world, Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. To the Norsemen, this place was simply Miklagard, the great city. At first, the Rus tried to raid the city, launching major naval assaults. However, the legendary, massive stone Theodosian walls and the terrifying Byzantine secret weapon known as Greek fire, a combustible liquid flame launched from brass tubes that could burn directly on water, kept the northern invaders at bay. The Byzantine emperor, however, was deeply impressed by the sheer bravery, massive physical size, and fighting skill of these northern warriors. Instead of trying to destroy them, the empire decided to weaponize their talents. following a treaty in 988 between Emperor Basil II and the Rus Prince Vladimir the Great, who converted to Orthodox Christianity. The emperor officially hired them. He created the Varangian Guard, an elite unit of Norse mercenaries who served as the emperor's personal bodyguards and ultimate battlefield shock troops. Armed with their signature two-handed Dane axes, for centuries, ambitious young men from Norway, Sweden, and Denmark, including future Norwegian king Harald Hardrada, traveled thousands of miles across the known world just to serve in the golden palaces of Constantinople. They returned home years later with chests overflowing with Islamic silver dirhams, exotic silks, and stories of unimaginable imperial wealth that sounded like pure myth to the folks back home. 5. Conquering the Atlantic to the edge of the world. But perhaps the most mind-blowing chapter of this global expansion happened in the opposite direction, out in the vast, terrifying emptiness of the North Atlantic. The Norse were incredible navigators. They didn't have compasses, charts, or modern instruments. Instead, they relied on master-class celestial navigation, the flight patterns of migrating birds, the color of the water, and a deep, intuitive understanding of the ocean currents. When life became too crowded or politically unstable in Norway due to the rise of centralized kings, like Harald Fairhair, families packed up their cattle, their tools, and their children into ships called nars. These were the sturdier, wider cargo cousins of the longship, purpose-built for heavy storage rather than quick beach raids. Venturing out into the freezing unknown west, they found and settled the lonely islands of the North Atlantic, the Shetlands, the Orkneys, the Faroes, and eventually, around the year 874, Iceland. Iceland was an incredible societal experiment. It was a place with no king, established by people explicitly fleeing royal tyranny. To govern this new land, the settlers created the Althing in 930, a massive outdoor assembly where free men gathered annually to settle disputes, pass laws, and judge crimes. It stands today as one of the oldest surviving parliaments in the world. From Iceland, the westward push continued. A hot-headed explorer named Eric the Red was banished from Iceland for murder. With nowhere else to go, he sailed further west into the fog and discovered a massive, icy landmass. In a brilliant marketing move to convince other people to join him in settling this harsh environment, he named this cold, rugged place Greenland. The trick worked, and two permanent Norse settlements, the eastern and western settlements, were established on the very edge of the habitable world, relying on the export of precious walrus ivory to Europe. It was Eric's son, Leif Erikson, who took the final, breathtaking step. Around the year 1000, Leif sailed even further west into uncharted waters. He struck land that he called Venland because of the wild grapes and timber his crew discovered. Today, we know this place as L'Anse aux Meadows on the northern tip of Newfoundland, Canada. For centuries, this voyage lived only in the realm of myth, detailed in the medieval Icelandic saga of the Greenlanders and the saga of Eric the Red. However, in 1960, Norwegian explorer Helge Ingstad and archaeologist Jan Stein Ingstad discovered physical proof buried in the Canadian soil. They unearthed the remains of 8 turf and wood buildings, including a functional iron-smelting smithy that utilized local bog iron to forge boat rivets. Archaeologists discovered crucial artifacts that proved this was an authentic Norse outpost, including a steatite spindle whorl and a bone needle used for knoll binding, an ancient form of knitting, which confirmed that Norse women were present on the expedition. Furthermore, a signature bronze-ringed pin used to fasten cloaks was found in the dirt. Modern wood ring analysis has definitively dated their woodcutting activity at the site to exactly the year 1021. Think about the sheer scale of that achievement. 500 years before Christopher Columbus set sail, Norse explorers had built a functional base camp in North America. A single culture had managed to stretch its reach all the way from the Canadian coast to the rivers of Russia and the palaces of the Middle East. 6. The end of an era. 1066. So, how did this incredible explosion of expansion finally come to an end? It didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen because the Norsemen were defeated in some massive apocalyptic battle. It happened because the world changed, and they changed with it. The very success of the raiders brought about their end. They adopted the local customs, married local women, and converted to Christianity. Back home in Scandinavia, the old system of rival chieftains fighting for local power gave way to centralized kingdoms. Denmark, Norway, and Sweden became unified Christian nations. The year 1066 is universally pointed to by historians as the official end of the Viking Age. In that year, the Norwegian king, Harald Hardrada, a man who had traveled the world, fought in the Varangian Guard, invaded England to claim its throne. He was defeated and killed at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Just weeks later, William the Conqueror, a direct descendant of the Norse raider Rollo, won the Battle of Hastings and took the English crown. The age of the wild sea rover was over. The age of structured European empires had begun. The legacy of those few Nordic raiders is deeply woven into the fabric of our modern world. We can still see their physical footprint directly on the map today. In England, the geographical boundary of the Danelaw, the historic region under Norse control, is clearly marked by more than 1,000 place names. Any modern town ending in by, meaning village or town, like Derby or Grimsby, or Thorpe, meaning hamlet, like Scunthorpe, tells us exactly where Norse families settled down to farm. Our everyday language was also completely reshaped by this cultural collision. Everyday English words like sky, egg, leg, knife, law, sister, husband, and even the pronoun they are direct Germanic loanwords brought over on long ships. The days of our week serve as a permanent calendar dedicated to their mythology. Tuesday, Tyw's Day, the god of combat. Wednesday, Woden's/Odin's Day, the chief god. Thursday, Thor's Day, the god of thunder. Friday, Frigg's Day, the goddess of motherhood. Beyond words, the Norsemen acted as global economic conductors. They connected the world in a way it had never been connected before, establishing an immense mercantile network that funneled Arctic furs and walrus ivory all the way down to the wealthy markets of the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad. This massive influx of silver bullion, or hack silver, which is chopped up silver objects, was used as currency by weight, jump-started the stagnant commercial economies of early medieval Europe. Politically, the constant threat of their raids acted as a catalyst for state building. To survive, fractured rival kingdoms were forced to unite, directly spurring the creation of unified nations in England under Alfred the Great's lineage, and in Scotland under Constantine II. By establishing the Kievan Rus, they laid the cultural and political foundations for modern Eastern European nations. Through Rollo's settlement in Normandy, they forged the elite knightly class that would later conquer England, Sicily, and lead the Crusades. They proved that the vast, terrifying oceans could be successfully conquered through exceptional seafaring engineering, an unbreakable spirit of adventure, and long-lasting legal traditions like the Icelandic Althing. These northern raiders permanently stepped out of the mists and irrevocably altered the course of human history. Ultimately, the story of the Norse expansion serves as an enduring reminder that history is driven by technological innovation and human daring. While the longships have long since decayed, the deep cultural, linguistic, and political pathways forged during those turbulent centuries continue to direct the flow of our modern global society. By examining these events with clear eyes, we unlock a more profound understanding of how our interconnected world truly came to be. Now it is your turn to keep the history alive. If you found this 20-minute masterclass insightful, take a moment to share this summary with a friend or colleague who loves history, and leave your thoughts on the incredible legacy of the Norse explorers below. Let's keep the conversation going.